we will be discussing about the second part of the brain, that is midbrain, or it is also called as mesencephalon. This mesencephalon is divided into two parts, the optic lobes and the cerebral peduncles. These optic lobes, mainly there are two lobes, but these two lobes, they are divided by a transverse fissure and hence they appear as four lobes. So these are the optic lobes. They are called as optic quadrigemina, and these are divided by a transverse fissure, and because of this division the upper part appears to be superior and it is called as superior colliculi, whereas the lower part is inferior colliculi. So these optic lobes, there are two main lobes and these are divided by the transverse fissure, therefore it appears as four lobes. The upper ones are called as superior colliculi and the lower ones are called as inferior colliculi, and together they are called as optic quadrigemina. This optic quadrigemina is a characteristic feature of mammals, or it is a characteristic of mammals. The another characteristic of mammals that we saw is the corpus callosum, this C-shaped structure. It is also a characteristic of mammals. So these optic quadrigemina, they help in the vision. This is their function. They help in the vision. So these are the optic lobes. They are also called as optic quadrigemina and they are the characteristic features of mammal. The second part that we will see is cerebral peduncles. Cerebral peduncles are longitudinal, long and longitudinal nerve bands. They are long and longitudinal nerve bands or nerve fibers, you can say, and their function is coordination in between forebrain and hindbrain. These cerebral peduncles, they are band-like structures and they are long and longitudinal, and their function is they are the connection in between the forebrain and the hindbrain. The another thing that we are going to discuss in this part, that is the limbic system. It is not actually a part of midbrain, it is a part of forebrain and it is associated with somewhat parts of the midbrain. So this limbic system, there are two main parts in the limbic system. First is the amygdala. These are the small almond-like structures which are present over here below the thalamus. Below each thalamus, these structures, that is the amygdala, they are present. They are in pair. These are the paired structures and they are present below the thalamus. And from these almond-like structures or from this amygdala, a structure arises from here, and it from below the thalamus it arises above the thalamus. This structure is called as the hippocampus. So there are two main structures in the limbic system. First is the amygdala and second is the hippocampus. These amygdala, they are actually paired structures. So separately if you have to draw, these are the almond-like structures. This is the first pair, this is the second, this is first and this is second. They appear to be in the pair, and this hippocampus, it arises from here in this way. So these are a fork-like structures which are present below the thalamus. And this amygdala, the function of amygdala is to control the emotions or to arise the emotions. Emotions like anger, fear and also sexual behavior. These kind of emotions are controlled by this amygdala. Whereas this hippocampus, it converts the short-term memory into a long-term memory. Whatever the memory we have, the short-term memory or whatever things are stored in our brain, that short-term memory is converted into a long-term memory, and that's why we remember the things for a longer period of time. So this is the midbrain. Midbrain is divided into two parts, optic lobes and the cerebral peduncles. Optic lobes are two main lobes which are divided by a transverse fissure, and hence it appears to be four lobes. The upper ones are bigger in size. They are called as superior colliculi, and the lower ones are called as inferior colliculi. These are also called as optic quadrigemina, and these are the characteristic features of mammals, and they help in the vision or in the sight. Whereas the cerebral peduncles, they are long and longitudinal bands of nerve fibers, and their function is they act as connection in between the forebrain and the hindbrain. And also we saw the limbic system. Limbic system consists of two main parts. First is the amygdala. These are the almond-like structures which are present below the thalamus. And from these amygdala, a structure arises from below the thalamus. It arises above the thalamus. These structures are called as hippocampus. The function of amygdala is regarding or is related to the emotions such as anger or fear. And hippocampus converts the short-term memory into a long-term memory. Third part of the brain, that is the hindbrain. It is also called as rhombencephalon. Rhombencephalon is further divided into three parts. First is cerebellum, second is pons varolii, and third is medulla oblongata. Now we will understand all these three parts one by one. So, the first part is cerebellum. This cerebellum is a solid structure, means it does not have any cavity inside. It is a solid structure and it has three lobes in it. It has three lobes. Out of these three lobes, the two lobes are larger and they are called as cerebellar hemispheres, whereas one lobe is smaller and it is long and it is called as vermis. And in the cerebellum, the outer is the grey matter, outside is the grey matter, whereas the inner white matter is divided into branching, just like the branches of trees, it is divided. And this branching is called as arbor vitae. So these in the cerebellum, the outer matter is the grey matter and the inner matter is white matter. This white matter is divided into a branch, or they are divided into branches, or it is branched just like the branches of tree, and these branchings are called as arbor vitae. And the function of this cerebellum is it maintains the posture and equilibrium by the voluntary control of muscles. It controls the muscles and it maintains the posture and equilibrium by controlling the voluntary action of muscles. The second part that we will see is the pons varolii or pons varolii. Now these pons varolii, they are oval in structure, and their function is they act as coordination in between the forebrain and the cerebellum. These pons varolii, they act as the coordination in between the forebrain and the cerebellum. It also helps in controlling involuntary functions like facial expressions and breathing center. So this pons varolii, it also helps in controlling the involuntary actions like facial expressions, and it also controls the breathing center. It has small nuclei which are the collection of neurons. It has many nuclei, and these nuclei are the collection of the neurons, and these help in controlling the involuntary actions. The third part which we will see, that is the medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is a hollow structure, means it has a cavity inside it, and that cavity is called as the fourth ventricle, and it is also called as myelocele. It is connected by the aqueduct of Sylvian to the third ventricle. Now as you can see in this diagram, these are the ventricles inside the cerebrum. These are the cerebral ventricles, and the one which is on the right side is called as the first ventricle, the one which is on the left side is called as the second ventricle. These ventricles, they join or they connect together with the structure or with the space that is called as foramen of Monera. So here from this, the these two ventricles, they connect in the third ventricle. This third ventricle is situated in the diencephalon region of the brain, and from this third ventricle arises a duct-like structure, and then it turns into a fourth ventricle. So this fourth ventricle is actually the medulla oblongata. It is the cavity of the medulla oblongata. The first two ventricles are called as paracele. The third ventricle is called as diocele, while the fourth ventricle is called as myelocele. And this third and fourth ventricle, they are connected to each other by the aqueduct of Sylvian, or it is also called as iter. So this is the structure of the ventricles in the brain. Now the roof of medulla oblongata is non-nervous in origin, means it is not made of neurons. Now it makes a posterior choroid plexus. The roof of this medulla oblongata, it makes the posterior choroid plexus, whereas the anterior choroid plexus is made by the epithalamus in the midbrain. Now it is responsible for the involuntary functions. This medulla is responsible for the involuntary functions. Functions such as it has centers. It has various centers which control the various activities or various actions or involuntary actions. It has centers for controlling heartbeat. That center is called as cardiac center. It controls the heartbeat. It also has centers which control breathing, and those centers are called as respiratory centers. Whereas it also has centers which control various involuntary functions or activities like peristalsis, sneezing, vomiting, urination and defecation. So these are the three structures of the hindbrain: cerebellum, pons varolii and medulla oblongata. Another thing that we will discuss, that is pons and medulla, they have grey matter outside and white matter inside, whereas in other parts of the brain the grey matter is inside and grey matter is outside and white matter is inside. But here in pons and medulla, grey matter is inside and white matter is outside, means the arrangement of neurons changes over here in pons and medulla. Also there is a structure, another important structure called as brain stem, which is present here. The brain stem, it includes the diencephalon, midbrain, pons and medulla. This brain stem, it includes, or it is made up of the structures, that is diencephalon, midbrain, pons and medulla. And in the brain stem, a system is present, and that system is called as reticular activating system. This system is actually a network of neurons. In the brain stem, a system is present, and that system is called as reticular activatory system. This system is made up of neurons, and this system does the screening of sensory information. Whatever sensory information is collected, that information is screened over here and then sent further or transferred further to the other parts of the brain. So this is the hindbrain. Hindbrain, also called as rhombencephalon. There are three parts of the hindbrain: cerebellum, pons varolii and medulla oblongata. Cerebellum is solid. It has three lobes. Two lobes are larger and one lobe is smaller. The larger lobes are called as cerebellar hemispheres, and the smaller one is called as vermis. And it controls the posture, or it maintains the posture and equilibrium by voluntary control of muscles. Whereas the pons, it is oval in structure, and it is the coordination between the forebrain and the cerebellum, and it helps in controlling the involuntary actions of the body. The next we saw, that is the medulla oblongata. It is a hollow structure. It has cavity inside, and that cavity is called as fourth ventricle, or it is also called as myelocele. And it is connected to the third ventricle by the aqueduct of Sylvian, or it is also called as iter. Now this medulla is responsible for all the involuntary functions in our body. It has centers which control the involuntary functions. It has center for controlling the heartbeat, that is called as cardiac center. It has center for controlling breathing, that is called as respiratory center. And it also controls other involuntary actions such as peristalsis, also sneezing, vomiting, or another thing, that is urination and defecation. And also the pons and the medulla, they have the gray matter inside and white matter outside. And there is another important structure or another important thing that is present in the pons and medulla, that is brainstem. It also includes diencephalon and midbrain, and also pons and medulla. This brainstem, it has a system that is called as reticular activatory system, and this reticular activatory system is made up of network of neurons, and this system does the screening of information which is collected by the brain, and after screening, that information is passed on